Thanks so much for tuning in and spending some of your precious time and attention with me. It is my absolute desire and intention to make sure that this is time well spent. That it's not time spent, it's time invested, right? Which means it'll pay dividends, I hope and pray, in your life. Today I want to talk a little bit about life as jazz. As many of you know, I am a trumpeter and have been since 6th grade. I started out on the piano because my mom forced me to, and then that was 4th grade, and 2 years later I was just dying to get out of the house and do something different, and my mom said, okay, well, you've got musical gifts, so you just play some instrument. I don't care if it's piano or not. And my first thought was drums. I'll be a drummer. And my mom says, except for drums. It's like, oh, why, Mom? Well, she says, well, if you're playing drums, then we're all playing drums. And just pick something that has a melody so we can enjoy the song. So my little 6th grade mind said, what's the next loudest instrument? Trumpet. I'll be a trumpet player. My mom says, okay, that's fine. So I started taking trumpet in band in 6th grade and just fell in love with the instrument, fell in love with not just the noise I could make, but the music I began to make after those, first few months of sounding like, as my mom said, a cow in labor. But she suffered through that, and eventually I just kept playing and playing, and as some of you know, that became my passport to the world. And one of my favorite forms of trumpet, favorite forms of music, is jazz. Not just because of how it sounds, but because of the experience as a musician. And in jazz, it's very interesting because there is a structure to the song, and the composer writes notes on the page, right? Everybody has a part to play. The time is established by the rhythm section. There's a key that everybody plays in, and play these really cool chords and really fun energy. And then there's one place in the song, in the jazz song, called a vamp, V-A-M-P. And a vamp basically is just an open staff on the music. There's repeat signs on one end and repeat signs on the other, and doesn't even say how many times you repeat, but there's no notes written down. So the rhythm section carries the time and keeps everything moving, but then the conductor will pick out players out of the band and give a chance to improvise, to solo. Now, as a musician growing up, I always was fascinated and aspired to become a soloist. But talk about nerve-wracking, right? And so I remember being in the band and listening to the other soloists and just admiring what they do, and going home and practicing my heart out, trying different things, learning scales and modes and all that kind of stuff. Credit to my band teacher, Grover Peterson, who did a marvelous job teaching music theory and inspiring young musicians like myself. And then as I grew older and more accomplished, the time came when the conductor said, so Joe, do you want a chance to solo during the song, during the live performance? And it was one of those moments, conflicted. Yes, I do, but do I really, right? And so I did. And that first solo, I don't even remember what song it was, and I remember it was very frightening. I was nervous, getting right up to the time when I would be exposed, right? Because all the tension would be on me. And I'm not one to be shy from attention, but this was very vulnerable, right? So I played my solo, very basic, using the scales that I'd learned, and got through it. And although it wasn't anything really to remember other than getting through it, it did excite me, right? It propelled me to want to do more and to do it better. And so I kept practicing, kept learning, kept listening to my favorite jazz musicians. What did Maynard Ferguson do, and Doc Severinsen and Louis Armstrong? I didn't learn their solos note for note, although there would have been, I think, great benefit to that. But I just got a feel for how did they use their instrument, and how do they use it in different ways to express what they were feeling, what they were thinking in those moments. But jazz then was very fulfilling as a musician because it allowed that opportunity for expression. right? When it was my turn, I would express the song in that moment. I would be feeling the energy and taking all the expertise and the practice and then just letting it flow through me to create something. And it wasn't always great. Sometimes it was really wonderful. And what I really learned too is that during those solo sections, I had two choices. I could practice a particular pattern and then kind of play from memory, maybe with a little flourish here and there, which is how I started. And then the more accomplished I got, my ability to just improvise on the fly and probably didn't do the same solo section in the same song twice, right? And very fulfilling, very fun, very that sense of aliveness that Brendan Burchard talks about, very much in play. As I reflect back on my wonderful experience as a jazz musician, I can't help but see this parallel, the metaphor for much of life, right? There are things in place that are there for our good to help us, guide us so that we don't harm ourselves or harm others, called morals, ethics, laws. Even the Bible has a prescription for us to help us understand what's the best way to live, the most fulfilling, most purposeful way. And of course, the human tendency, well, my human tendency, when there are regulations, when there are restrictions, I see them as restrictions, I want to push up against them, right? I don't want anybody telling me what to do. In fact, the little kid in me says, you're not the boss of me. But if I can just remember that parallel with jazz, that there is a time signature, there's a key signature, that when the vamp comes and it's my turn to shine, I can't just play whatever I want. If I play notes that are out of time or that are out of tune, the rest of the band knows it, and they're not happy about it. I can see them looking over their shoulder like, what's Joe doing? And I want to contribute to the greater good. I want to contribute to the artistry and the beauty that's being produced, that I get to play my part. But I've got to practice, I got to prepare, and I have to submit to the rules of the road, to what's been established for the common good. So I just really see this metaphor as a challenge. I mean, as I'm looking into the camera here, I'm talking to me as much as I'm talking to you and talking to anybody, is to remember that there are things in place in life, things that we have to do, things that we shouldn't do, and those are for our good. That my rebellious nature to want to do it my way often gets me in trouble. And yet there's also opportunities, not just throughout our life, but throughout our day, where we get to improvise, we get to make choices, we get to find out, am I prepared, right? What can I contribute? What can I give? What can I add? How can I make this more beautiful? Not just for the accolades, the attention, for the applause, which is really kind of a selfish motive, right? It's giving to get something back. But the opportunity that I get to give, I get to give of my experience, my expertise, my expression, and help add my colors to the palette, right? To the creativity. This picture came to mind while I was talking on a wisdom app, which I do regularly. I'm one of the quote-unquote top mentors there. And I was listening to a talk and I jumped in and I just started sharing about this picture in my mind. I was seeing a kaleidoscope and all these little pieces of glass, right, that form, as I look through the hole, form the beautiful mosaic. Just gorgeous. I remember as a kid, I was so fascinated about kaleidoscopes. And then this thought came to mind, okay, in this vast array of little pieces of glass, each with their own color and texture and shape, I could see that one of them was me. It was like an orange hexagon, and it had a little pebbly surface. And then the kaleidoscope turned, which is they do, and all the pieces start moving, and they would fall into place into a new pattern and create a new piece of art. In fact, with every turn, the glass pieces were always moving. And it came to me that I started looking for, where's the little orange hexagon? Where did I go? And I felt this nudge inside of me saying, guess what? Now you're a square, and it's blue and it's smooth. And then as it turned, then suddenly I was a circle and yellow. And then I was translucent. And every piece of the kaleidoscope, every piece was in motion and changing, but always creating something beautiful. And I just got this idea that life, the universe, each of us are a kaleidoscope, but we're always in motion. It's not just a tapestry, which I've heard people use, or a mosaic on the wall, but it's a mosaic in motion. Because as time and space, as we go through, as we grow, as we add experience, as understanding, we are given this beautiful opportunity to contribute something in each situation, but it doesn't have to look exactly the same. Just like the jazz solos. I could play the same song over and over again, but in the vamp, I got to express my expertise and add color and flavor, and a solo might not have been the same twice. I use that all as an encouragement and an invitation to each of us to remember that there are parameters in life, but they're not restrictions to keep us small or to keep us obedient, right? It's not a have to, it's a get to. I get to play in the grand orchestra, the grand jazz band of life, and there are rules and regulations and morals and ethics. There are prescriptions in place that are for all of our good, and yet we all have an opportunity to express our color, our texture in any given moment, and it may look different as God, with his loving hands, continues to turn this kaleidoscope. So all of that to say, you are created in your unique, special way. You've been given gifts, talents, abilities, and then you've been given the opportunity each day to hone your craft, to explore your tendencies, to find those gifts, those purpose, and to practice them, to get really good at who you are and what you do and what you have to contribute, so that if in any given moment you can add to the color, the texture, the music of your life. To change the metaphor just slightly, one of my favorite words, and I don't think I made it up, but I love using it, is awesome sauce. And I fully believe that each of us have our own unique recipe of awesome sauce. We each bring a flavor, a color, a texture, a spice to the recipe of life. And so I encourage you to find your awesome sauce, to refine it, to add it to the mix. We need you.